So I'm excited for this next panel. It's about the power of social storytelling and influencers and what's happening in the market right now, where we think it's going. Obviously ties into video because most of that is happening in the video space. And I have two amazing panelists up here that have so much experience in the area, and I know that you'll learn a lot from them, and I'll let them introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about their companies.
Thank you. So nice to be here. I'm Tumarin. I'm the CEO and founder of Vanity Planet Beauty. It's the new revamped version of what we're launching as it's going to be known as Vanity Planet Beauty, along with beauty tech tools and consumables. A little bit about me and my background. I was basically born into the beauty and wellness space. My grandmother was a chemist. She was trademarked and patented for a couple of B12 vitamins, and then my mom had medical spas when I was growing up. So I was always going to go into beauty and skincare and wellness. After college and working at my mom's spas and as an esthetician, I worked for Tom Ford Beauty for about 5.5 years. That's when I began my career with his first fragrance, working with Tom Ford under Estee Lauder. Then I was with Clarins, L'Oreal, Chanel, Sicily, a bunch of incubator brands. And then right before COVID happened, I started Global Nurse Skincare, which is a brand I launched and formulated and crafted and created and designed from A to Z. And it was my baby. That was a pet project that I was doing as, basically a hobby while being a CEO for another company called Higher Education Skincare. So I launched that during COVID times as well and scaled that brand, which eventually sold and got acquired. And then about January of this year, Strategic approached me about becoming a CEO for Vanity Planet, which was acquired from the previous management. And they acquired me along with Global Nurse Skincare and rolled the consumables into the beauty tech space. So that's how I became CEO and founder of Vanity Planet Beauty.
Well, I'm Scarlette. I'm the CEO and founder of Sure Thing Consulting. We are a social and influencer marketing agency helping all types of brands, from legacy brands trying to find their footing in social to new brands just getting started. We've seen an explosion of new companies launch since the pandemic. At the heart, I'm a storyteller, naturally a social storyteller now. I was the nerd in middle school banging on the principal's door, like demanding a middle school newspaper, and that's now just naturally translated into Instagram and TikTok and YouTube and Pinterest, and we all love to hate it, hate to love it. But I'm, really passionate about building brands and helping people learn to love social and use it to, fuel video commerce and sales and all the fun stuff. I kind of launched my career in beauty with Fenty Beauty by Rihanna. Really kind of found my love for influencer marketing there, and now get to play with a bunch of beauty brands and lifestyle and wellness and fashion brands. So I love my job, so it's great.
You can keep that one.
Okay.
All right, so I want to just dive into TikTok because that's obviously changing everything. So I would love for you to talk about how TikTok and TikTok Shop are changing the influencer space.
I'll start with you.
Okay. Well, I feel like the panel before this really set me up for success and also kind of an uphill battle because TikTok has changed so much. I think a lot of the keywords that were brought up in the last panel really ring true. Anyone can be an influencer this day. The algorithm kind of has modeled this approach of word of mouth marketing, where if you're telling a really good story, you have the power to have really big influence. So I love that because it's opened the doors for so many people to be an influencer, whether you have 45 followers or hundreds of, thousands. But it's also made our jobs really difficult. People are scrolling for hours, but also not by choice. It's kind of become habitual. So you really have a lot to do to capture their attention. And I think with TikTok Shop, it really signifies now that it's like an ad or an affiliate marketing. So you have even more to do to really secure that hook. And, with influencers and with social storytelling, whether it's organic or sponsored or just from a really passionate consumer. It's all about blending entertainment and education. So it's this kind of dance between getting your point across but also connecting in a meaningful way. So it's definitely like disturbed the landscape, but it's a roller coaster, lots of ups and downs.
Excellent. I'll go a slightly different direction within TikTok in the way that it's actually changing the landscape of retail for us, where we've had a lot of buyers actually give us feedback that TikTok is becoming an Amazon-like competitor for retailers like Nordstrom, Von Maur, all the other retailers. So we started treating TikTok and all the content that we build really purposefully. And we use our influencers as storytellers because that's what they do best. And with Firework, what we were able to do, especially with the iOS 14 changing the algorithm, all the things that are happening on the other side of all the social handles, we started rolling all of those TikTok videos onto our landing page and repurposing all of that content through Firework. So I was a champion for Firework ever since the inception. I was part of their beta testing on the higher education side when I implemented that. So the conversion that we saw when we implemented TikTok was about 40 to 60% increase. So for us, TikTok is one of those things where if you use it correctly and if you have the correct content on there that's curated to TikTok itself versus what you would typically put on, let's say, Pinterest or Instagram, and keep it raw. I think what I realized from managing all of, marketing and social media with the help of Wendy is that you have to make sure that TikTok itself is authentic. It's not the same glossy finish that you would see on Pinterest or Instagram or other handles where you have to keep it raw. And the more raw and more authentic TikTok is, and then repurpose that on the landing page, that's when you really start to see the results from TikTok.
Yeah, that kind of led me into my next question, which is how are the strategies playing out differently on Instagram versus TikTok? And you're talking about making good TikTok content, but what is that? And how are you finding the people that are creating that for you?
Sure. So when I started Global Nurse Skincare, it was bootstrapped. It came from my bank account and my paycheck, and it was either start a brand or put down a deposit on a house. And I decided to start a brand, so maybe later on I could buy a better house. So I was like, if this doesn't work, then, at least I did it. I tried. I could say, I was there. So when I looked at how much money it actually takes to create videos and to have video shoots and to pay influencers, and I live in a hub of it in LA, I was like, this is insanity. How does a small brand that bootstrap really compete with those huge Estee Lauder? And I come from those type of brands. How do we compete in the landscape? So I got real scrappy and I traveled. I started traveling to Mexico, to Bali, and sourcing nomads that are influencers. The cost of living is way cheaper. The influencers there have a more of an authentic voice. It's not as Me Too type content that you see in LA. It's not cookie cutter glossy images where you get more authentic people out and abroad. So I started looking at the world as a much bigger space than just the US of content creation. Because again, it's a digital footprints that we have. So why are we isolating ourselves to only the US or North America for influencers? You could repurpose and you can, give an influencer the guidelines and give the type of content that you want and the criteria that you want and still get the quality content at a much lesser price. So that's how I started curating.
I love it. The world is an oyster full of content creators. I would say I always tell my clients two things. Like, Instagram is still such an important platform. I think probably most people in this room open Instagram more than they open TikTok. And the way that TikTok and Meta kind of explained it is you check Instagram, but you consume on TikTok. So I think that when you're looking at different types of content, it's really important to kind of understand how your consumers are also willing to engage with it. Like, I heard a lot about like this kind of doom scrolling and on the hunt for finding meaningful content, and that is so true. I mean, even myself, like, I go down the weirdest rabbit holes at 2 a.m. on TikTok, looking for client research, but it's really like the latest bunny rabbit video. And I kind of tell I'm weird with animals, but I tell my clients, you know, like Instagram is kind of your storefront, right? It's this mix of aspirational content that, you know, engagement on Instagram has been challenging for many years now. The algorithm is not that kind to a lot of growing brands, even ones with millions of followers. But the key is really like honing in on your current audience and making sure your content's really like shareable. Those are the metrics that are really going to help you there. So how do you populate the content to that platform? That's going to make sure it's really shareable. On TikTok, on the other hand, it's discoverable. So really making sure that the content is relatable, that you're pulling in from people from all walks of life, all different types of audience groups, and then using kind of social search to make sure that it's, you know, landing on the right arms. And I think that there's really, you know, echoing what you said, there's really no limit to who can produce content now, but making sure that the look and feel of it matches each platform is so important. You can't just get one video and cross-promote it anymore. You have to dice it up and slice it up in all the ways.
Well, you led into the next question on social search. So how can brands optimize for that? Because it is becoming increasingly more of a place where people are looking to discover. What are people doing well to succeed there, and what are they doing wrong?
Yeah, I think that a lot of brands mistake social search for, you know, captions and hashtags, but it's actually also the script of videos. It's the way that you're adding in multiple hashtags. It's the way you're kind of putting keywords into your on-screen text. There are so many things to search for. So say gray hair or vitamin C. You know, what are the benefits that people are trying to solve for when they're searching for those products? What are the, you know, like-minded individuals who are constantly posting about it? How can you kind of tap into their network and see, you know, what they're talking about and how to leverage those keywords? I think with the power of AI, the tools are endless for you to kind of find all this information. So it's really about integrating it into every element of your content as possible. And then, of course, matching it back to your D2C. So what are the keywords that you're ranking for on your own website? And how do you make sure that the videos that you're either sponsoring or just creating on your own and rolling out on your own social channels continue to help that social search and rank?
Excellent. I'll always stick to 3 points when I look at content creation. Are you adding value to the customer? Are you educating the customer? Or are you having a purpose for that video that is going to bring a solution to that customer? It's that simple. So if you're educating, adding value, or offering them something, that's the hook, right? And unless you're, entertainment, of course, is up there because it's video and content creation and all the things, right? So that has to touch all the 3 points. But I think that when brands get confused is when they step out of their brand guidelines in a way where it's your Bible and what you're driving with and what you're actually adding to the customer as a value, where they try to do too many things and be everything for everybody. You're not going to be everything for everybody as a brand. Pick your audience and stick to that audience and stick to those 3 pillars that you're offering to them.
So obviously, as a branding agency, I love that, and I love brand guidelines. I was recently talking to the head of marketing for Lowe's, and he said that he's been having a lot of success with a lot more affiliates versus their traditional influencers, and that they will sell out of items across the country, and they can't figure out what it is, and it's some random person in some little town that they never sent a script to or anything like that that's working. So how do you marry now this element of you want the brand representatives, you want them being on script, but then it's also these wild cards that can, you know, hit like this great success for you, and how are you navigating that?
So I'll go back to Global Nourish and having no money in the beginning, because I think that fundamentally every single brand, whether you have a budget or you don't have a budget, do everything that you can organically before you start paying for things. And the biggest thing that we did in the beginning was create this kind of cult-like following behind products from these influencers, and some of them were very much micro-influencers at the time that grew with us, and we invested in their content, and then we created affiliate links to where they were making money off of our brand as well. So when you give influencers and followers that are creating content for you, an incentive to go the extra mile with you, that's when it's going to matter. Because I think that, and I know that from experience, when you have, let's say, a cohort of about 20 influencers that are your diehard influencers, you can always lean into their content when you're struggling, because you will have those lulls where you don't have content. Let's say you run out of budget, or you need a really big push for a promotion. You can call on those 20 influencers and say, hey guys, can you help me out? I will send you free product. I'll pay you next year when I have a bigger budget, but can you do this for me? And I'll create an affiliate link that, let's say, will have 30% to them that they can disperse versus 15%. And they will go the extra mile every single time. Because if you look at your margin retail wise, what you're doing at retail, that, let's say retail is 50-50 margin, and the back end program with supporting retail, right? If you're creating an affiliate link for an influencer, your margin's still really healthy when it's D2C, or if you're selling on Instagram or TikTok or whatever it is. So you're always going to be profitable the tighter the community that you have.
I love that. And I think, echoing off of what you're saying, lifetime value is also important with the influencers that you work with, right? It's not just for the consumers who are buying your products. You want to invest in an influencer, whether it's through affiliate or just through product, right? We know that product can be expensive, especially if they're demanding new products every single month. You want them to continue to promote your brand and drive those organic mentions. And I think the way I look at, these kind of wild cards of influence versus, how do we brand a piece of content that really reflects who we are as a company or who my clients are, it's kind of this like two-pronged approach, right? There's a way to look at influencer marketing as people who have influence, right? They can show up in a robe and, their hair up and sell the hell out of a product. You don't need to really kind of tap into them for paid media. They can do it on their own. I wouldn't necessarily want to ever brand wash them. It kind of removes the authenticity of the type of content that they create. But on the other hand, those people that you want to tap into to then put your content on your website or put paid media behind it, they're the content creators. You really want them to kind of represent and show up the way that you would in creating your own content. And I think that on the other side of that is, how do you leverage these organic influencers? You want to look at those with big reach and driving awareness, and then those that have really engaged, audiences, and those that, can just convert anyone on like John Deere tractors, even just through a blog post, but they have, hundreds of thousands of farmers listening to them because it's a really true, credible voice. So I always stay clear of trying to brand wash everyone, but there's definitely a time and a place to say, okay, you can't have like a rainbow shirt with, punk hair on. We're trying to sell like very neutral colors. So yeah, it happens. It happens.
As you look forward to 2025, what is your approach to working with influencers? How has it changed? And are there any trends or predictions that you see that you'd like to talk about?
Okay. I love this question because I feel like you can actually track whether trends are taking off or not. And I think looking back at this year, 2024, I can't believe it's December already. Employee advocacy was such a big trend this year. Brands turning in and using the people who work for them and really feel as passionate as they do to become these people of influence. And I think that that's going to go one step further. I think that a lot of brands are going to kind of build these like social clubs of community and, build these deeper connections beyond just, hey, you're buying our product, or hey, we're creating content with you. How do you get them to show up in other ways? And I think that that kind of 360 approach to influencer marketing is going to be so important. As you can see from this group, like people thrive for connection, and they really yearn for that. And so I think the brands who can tap into whether they're paid partners, leveraging them to kind of cultivate new audiences, or even just starting running clubs or walking clubs or book clubs that kind of match. I think like Warby Parker just recently sponsored a ton of book clubs, and it was so clever because it's, naturally people picking up their readers, but it's not necessarily pushing their product. They're just bringing people together and kind of honoring why. I'm really excited for that kind of aspect of it.
I love that. And I will not repeat all of that information and echo what you're saying, because I think you're 100% correct. I think that brands that drive with authenticity is going to be key. To your point of using employees, or, the behind the scenes for us, the conversion that we see and the audience growth that we see when we really showcase when we have good times and bad times with the brand has really taken off. Because for us, it's like, like, we see these glossy finishes of a brand, but what customers are really connecting to is the actual heartbeat and soul of the brand. And if you're a founder and if you are a CEO where you're driving that force and driving that collective forward, be that for your brand as well, not just your employees, and your audience is going to feel that. Every single time that I've been part of a brand, and I've launched over 12 brands into retail that are still in Sephora, that are still in Ulta, and globally into Boots, other retailers, the thing that I see the most, that the brands that really succeed are the ones that have a really strong, authentic brand message from the founder, the CEO, and have a mission statement that they share. So an authenticity, meaning that, you have a great launch and it's all glossy and perfect, and you showcase that and you showcase your best product. What about the products that didn't do well, and why? I always speak to always the challenges with the brand as well, to where we discontinued a product, what can we do better? And I'll lean on the audience to give me feedback. I'll have, a collective do a poll for what we actually could do better next time. So really getting people involved into your brand, that's what builds brand loyalty. And to your point, you want your customer to come back and buy, 12 products, 20 products. Of course you do. And that's why you have to create that connection and that authenticity with every single customer.
I think also something that was brought up in the last panel is like stop siloing influencer marketing, like integrate it into as many ways that you can. I know the kind of quick, easy responses are like, okay, in email and ads and on websites. So how can you take that even further? So if you're paying an influencer to create a piece of content and they're going to post that on their channel, can you tack on an extra ad of like, hey, can you now create one for our website? That's going to be a little bit more bespoke to what your needs are. I think that as much as we can like integrate it and like get the feedback back, we're going to learn so much from these people because they clearly know what they're doing. As much as we question that, influencers know what they're up to. And I think if we can like tap into that more, it's going to be like insightful.
And here's a shameless plug for Firework. Did you know that you can actually incorporate your UGC content into emails and into SMS now, amplifying what Firework actually does? So that made our email and SMS tenfold better. Our conversion, our open rate increased by 20-30%. So the fact that we didn't have to work that much harder to create emails where we could pop in UGC that was already paid for and already created by an authentic influencer or somebody that the community already connects with. No, I don't work for Firework. I've just been a huge fan.
Well, another plug for Firework. People are coming to us all the time to create content for them, and they're spending so much money, and it just makes sense to use it other places. It's like, to me, a no-brainer to just keep integrating it. And to chime into what you said, I think, the brands that we're seeing that are successful right now are being authentic. And I know that word's overused, but it's also that it's not just one random ad on Instagram. Like, that story arc is being carried throughout. You see that those people are ingrained into the brand. And another big thing is like clinicals and data and all the science behind the brand, thankfully, is making a comeback, which I love. People aren't just buying into a pretty face telling them to do this anymore. They need to see multiple touch points. They need to understand how it works, why it works, and what it does, and why they need it. And I'm definitely buying Array after this. I need to stop going every 5 weeks. Okay, one last question that I personally get a lot, and I think you guys are more equipped to answer it. When you're a smaller brand with a limited budget, and most people don't have millions and millions to spend every month, how do they allocate budget across all these different channels when there's TikTok and there's Pinterest and there's Instagram and there's out of home now that's making a comeback? Like, how do you, decide internally, and how are you advising brands?
First, I always say, regardless of what your budget looks like, do everything organically that the platform offers ahead of time before you spend any money. Whether it's having A+ content on there, cleaning up your hashtags, whatever it may be per that platform, do that first before any dollars go into it. And then look at your audience. Where do they live? Because just because, TikTok is popular doesn't mean that your audience lives there automatically. your audience might be in a different category, or the way that their behavior is and their search behavior is different because of the generations, right? So they might be a Pinterest audience or a TikTok audience because that's what they're used to, Meta. You know, TikTok is fairly new, so it's going to be a younger consumer. It's getting to be an older consumer just because of the way that TikTok is serving up content to be shoppable. So it is gaining a much wider audience from their demographics that we're seeing. But be smart with your dollars and look at where your customers actually, you know, are. And you know, that's why you do everything organically. So you test everything first, you see where the algorithm takes you, and then you invest into that.
Yeah, I think it's you said it perfectly. Like, understand where your consumer plays, and it's not, you know, you don't have to go so far deep into it. If it's as simple as Instagram is our priority platform, then put your all into that. If it's TikTok and it's video, then put your all into that. And I think don't be afraid to test and learn. Like, you're never going to figure it out just by doing the same thing over and over. You have to be creative. You have to be willing to kind of test and fail. And those fails are what's going to kind of teach you in the long run. And also don't be afraid to like get creative and bring more people in the room. Like, the social team is great. They have tons of ideas, but talk to D2C. What are they seeing? What are they learning? Talk to your email team. Talk to your ads team. It should all be kind of connected. And I think when you see something start to take off, don't be afraid to go all in on that.
Amazing. How about questions? Anyone have some burning Candy, starting us off.
Many questions, but I was curious your guys' thoughts on working with influencers cross categories. So like sometimes you might have beauty influencer, so maybe they're known for beauty, but then they're also like pumping out a million similar brands, you know, across their feed versus going, I'm gonna work with a foodie influencer, but I have a health and wellness like, you know, beauty product. Do you feel that it's a good way to get into a new audience base, or do you feel like it's pretty much tried and true to stick within creators within their known?
Definitely spread your wings. One of my clients had insane results. Their skincare brand on like, you know, whitelisting and kind of targeting people who follow Dodo. It's so strange. Like, the animal connection to skincare connection, I would never assume that. And as an influencer marketer, I learn new things every day. But I think that you have to think of your own consumer behaviors. Like, do you only follow beauty influencers? Do you only follow fashion influencers? And if you do, that's very niche and I respect that. But I get influence from all over. And I think especially if someone kind of fits the brand, whether they're health and wellness, but they have gorgeous skin, I feel like the credibility that they bring when they finally talk about a product can be more than when someone who talks about a million different skincare items. So
Curious if the conversion was similar.
it was like much higher on some of the tests that we did with these like kind of food and beverage, and then like I don't know, animal influencers, like animal adjacent influencers. It was really high versus like some of the beauty influencers that we work with. I mean, obviously it's a blanket statement. There's some who really convert in beauty because they're just credible, but some of these, you know, smaller influencers, we were kind of seeing, you know, really competitive results, if not more on the other side.
Can you repeat the question one more time? Because I have a thought on it specifically. So.
Asking, like, if you're a beauty brand, you know, a lot of times people will target influencers that are known for their beauty regimen, or they're just known as a beauty influencer, versus animals is a perfect example, like left field, right?
Yep.
Where maybe it's like like-minded brand philosophy or life philosophy, and I was curious if the conversion rates of both type of the, you know, sometimes I'd imagine it might even be higher because all of a sudden this loyal audience is hearing about a category that they're not used to. It feels like when your friend suggests a dog food you should buy for your dog, or like whatever it might be, that it feels more authentic, I guess, than an influencer sometimes is
Yep.
pumping out 20, you know, face serums, different brands. You're like, okay, well, what one are they getting paid by today?
Yep.
You know?
And this is what it triggered. So I'll use the reference for Nike when they did a rebrand, and then what we did as a rebrand for Vanity Planet Beauty. So Vanity Planet Beauty has been around for about 12 years. It was run by a gentleman that started, you know, toothbrushes before. Then he got into facial brushes, facial steamers, and it was primarily a D2C brand that was really influencer driven. So heavy so that when the iOS 14 happened, it bottomed out their sales. So and that's when financially they kind of got in trouble, and the original investor, Birch Strategic Capital, came in and took over the brand, right? So when I came into Vanity Planet, I had a huge overhaul that I needed to do with the brand. And, the products were phenomenal. They were off the charts. The customers were really happy with the performance. We really, had this space where a lot of people weren't playing in different categories of microcurrent, facial steamers, nanotechnology, LED technology across the board. There's other companies that do either microcurrent or LED or whatever it is, right? So, and then we bring in consumables. And then I looked at the brand itself and I thought about, what are we actually selling? And as a brand, you're not actually selling product itself only. You're selling a feeling, you're selling a following, you're selling, whether it's Nike, for example, that's why I'm using it as a reference. They were selling just do it. They were driving motivation. They weren't selling sneakers. So when I started doing the rebrand as the CMO, acting CMO until I could afford to hire a CMO, I really asked the fundamental question of, what am I selling? And it was wellness. I really played in the wellness space previously with skincare and topicals, and then beauty tools are very much the same, creating those rituals and those moments. So no, to your question is, you do have a broader audience with influencers where they don't just live in beauty tech or skincare or whatever it is. You can have a wellness moment where you can create a ritual and use, let's say, an influencer that has a home cooking network of some sort, where how does she take her downtime from what she does, in her 5 minutes, where she uses her facial steamer for 5 minutes. So, and the conversion is better when you reach outside of your circle, but I'll go back to doing everything organically first. That's bare bones of what is right for the brand to establish brand identity, and then driving it into an outside circle that's going to really create momentum for you.
Yeah, and I think that it's, you can't just kind of throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. Like, I would really ask yourself the questions of, like, who are these influencers? What do they have to show up for before I go and take the risk? I have clients who really know beauty and skin are their bread and butter, but we have this, like, 80-20 rule where 80% will be in that market, and then 20% we're willing to test each campaign on, like, new types of influencers. And I feel like that's a really fair split. And then as you start to learn, that percentages can evolve. And yeah, I think also, like, when you're finding these influencers, like, vetting them out, like, so if you're going to go into a new territory, like, what do you want to make sure that they hit on versus what they don't? Like, if they're too crazy and every post is about animals, maybe they're not the right one. But if they're talking about animals and wellness and good food, and then the connections there, like, I think that's a good segue into a new audience type.